Te reo ererangi o te mānia. This episode was produced in Otatahi by Plains Media, with support from New Zealand On Air.
This is Simply Nourish, empowering women through menopause and beyond. I am your host, Brenda Bickerstaff. Join me and my guests for an inspiring conversation about how they survived and thrived during this important new chapter of life. Kia ora, whānau. Today's conversation is one I think so many women will quietly resonate with. It's about getting curious about our relationship with alcohol, especially in midlife, when our bodies are already changing, our sleep isn't quite the same, stress can feel higher, and what used to work maybe doesn't feel so good anymore. For many women, alcohol sits in a space where everything looks fine on the outside, but underneath there's a quiet awareness that something feels a little off. Today I'm joined by Sarah Rusbatch, a grey area drinking coach, a multi-award-winning health and wellbeing coach, and the author of Beyond Booze, How to Create a Life You Love Alcohol-Free. Sarah has helped thousands of women rethink their relationship with alcohol through education, research, and her global online community, the Women's Wellbeing Collective. Sarah, thank you so much for joining me today, all the way from Perth.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolute pleasure. Before we get into it, I thought I'll throw a few little quick-fire questions to you, just to get everyone, relaxed. All right, are you a morning person or a night owl?
Morning, all the way.
Tea or coffee?
Coffee.
Favourite way to unwind now?
A bubble bath and a great book.
Wonderful. One thing you don't miss about drinking?
The shame and regret and not remembering what I said the night before.
One thing you gained that surprised you?
Self-discovery and self-awareness.
Your go-to non-alcoholic drink?
Sparkling water. I'm pretty boring.
Sounds good to me, with a twist of lemon maybe?
Exactly, if I'm really going to go out there.
And what does feeling good mean to Sarah these days?
It's everything. Feeling good means that every single day of my life is a gift, and I get to experience that with love, with presence, with connection, to be the mum that I want to be, the friend, wife, daughter, sister, and coach that I want to be for the thousands of women that I support.
Fantastic. I first found you online when I was going through my own journey of giving up alcohol, and when I read your book Beyond Booze, How to Create a Life You Love Alcohol-Free, when I read it, or as I was reading it, I'm like, oh my God, she's telling my story. And it's quite amazing. And one of the things I discovered when I was going through the journey and when I joined your online community was that we're not alone in it. And there are so many women who are going through the same thing. And you brought up the word shame, which we'll look at a little bit later. But there is that huge stigma around it, whether it's just we feel it deep within ourselves. But we'll get more into that. But what I'd love to hear about first, and what the listeners would love to hear about, is your story.
Yeah. So I grew up in the north of England, and alcohol had been role modeled to me, I would want to probably say in a really positive way growing up, in terms of what I witnessed was my parents having parties and dinner parties, and this was the 80s and the early 90s, and the alcohol was always there, and there was no negative connotations to it. It was raucous laughter, it was drunk adults wandering around my house laughing and giggling and everything like that. So as a little girl, I just created a very, very strong perception that drinking was what you did as a grown-up to have fun. Drinking was kind of the only thing that grown-ups did to have fun. And drinking was what you did with your friends when you were a grown-up. So for me, it was not a question of if I would drink, it was a question of when I would drink. And for me, that started pretty early, as it did, I think, for a lot of people in the UK at that time, and probably in Australia and New Zealand as well. I started drinking at 14. We would kind of nick whatever we could find in our parents' drinks cabinet, which going back then was like bottles of Southern Comfort and Cinzano and Martini, and you'd mix it all together into like a soda stream bottle and put some Coca-Cola on top and go down the local park, and everyone would be like, "What did you get? What did you get?" And we would all just drink it. I mean, it's disgusting when you think about it now, but that was kind of it. And very early on, I loved alcohol. I loved how it made me feel. I got very lit up by alcohol. And we can come on to the neuroscience later as to kind of what I've discovered around that. But for me, there was no negatives to drinking. It was all positive. It was kind of, and then you start getting feedback. So the feedback I started getting was, "You're so funny when you're drunk. You're hilarious when you're drunk. You're so much fun when you're drunk." So what you start to create is this whole persona of, oh, people really like me when I'm drunk. And as a teenage girl who's, feels a bit awkward, you want that. You want people to like you. And so alcohol then became something that I did to connect. It was my social life. I went to university where obviously, we're talking the early 1990s in the UK, university culture was drinking, as I'm sure it was in New Zealand and in Australia, right? And so it was like £1 a pint. So it was cheap to drink and it was encouraged to drink. And university was kind of drinking first, studying second. And I wore my drinking capacity as a badge of honor. I had a big capacity for alcohol. I wasn't someone that had 2 drinks and fell over. I could match the lads pint for pint. I could drink with the rugby boys. And I saw that as, that was something to be really proud of. And I got positive affirmation from that as well. "Oh, you're all right, Sarah. You can match the lads pint for pint." So again, you don't know it at the time. But what you're doing is starting to just create more and more of this persona that you as a drinker is a positive thing. Moved straight to London after that, carried on drinking. The drinking changed. I got a job. I was working in recruitment. And I mean, in London, this was in the 90s as well, there was not a single night of the week that someone wasn't going to the pub. And, in London, especially, no one drives anywhere because no one has a car. So there's always someone going to the pub. Monday's the same as Friday. And again, just drinking, drinking, drinking. And then I met my husband, who's actually from New Zealand, from Hawke's Bay. And I met him when I was traveling. We settled down back in London. We got married. We had our first baby, and then we made the decision to move to Australia. And that was probably when my drinking changed. And that was when my drinking became, well, you can't go out partying all the time when you've got a baby. And well, number one, I had a baby, and number two, I had no friends because we'd just moved to the other side of the world. So I had no one to drink with. So that was when my drinking became something I did at home on my own. I was really homesick. I was really lonely. I was really confused because on paper, I had everything that I wanted. I got pregnant again very quickly, and I had 2 beautiful, healthy boy and a girl, 2 under 2. I didn't have to work because we'd saved enough money from our time in London to move to Australia and for me to have time off and be mum. And yet, no one prepares you for how that's going to feel when you've had a really, really big, successful career and you're a real people person, and all of a sudden you're at home on your own with 2 kids, changing nappies, pureeing carrot, singing nursery rhymes. And I just didn't know who I was. And alcohol became something that made all those confused and sad feelings go away. And that was probably then the beginning of when my relationship with alcohol became more something, instead of drinking to enhance a good time, which is what I'd done in my social 20s and early 30s, my mid 30s until my early 40s, was alcohol was being more, I in the book I talk about magic, medicine and misery. And magic was those like teens and 20s. There was no negatives to my drinking. It was all social and positive. And then it became medicine. So it was the thing that I was turning to stop me feeling the way that I was feeling, because I worked out very quickly, oh, if I feel sad, if I feel homesick, if I feel lonely, if I feel stressed, if I've had an argument with my husband and I have a drink, in the short term, that feeling goes away. And that was then kind of when my drinking became a little bit more problematic.
Did you ever hide any of your drinking?
Yeah, not a lot. Like, I wasn't a constant secret drinker, but there would definitely be times where I would drink quickly and I might kind of be in the pantry pretending to pour a glass of wine, and I'd pour half a glass, drink it really quickly, and then top up my glass and walk back out into the kitchen as if that was the glass that I'd just poured. Because, like, why did I do that? Because I wanted the alcohol in my system quickly. I was a fast drinker. I wanted the feeling of the alcohol, but I knew it wasn't socially acceptable to drink that fast. So it was like I had to get my little hit before other people could see. And then when I was out in front of other people, I wanted to model, yeah, of course I'm just a healthy, normal drinker.
It's interesting because, like, when you're younger, it's all about showing off that we can stick it with the boys and we can keep drinking as much. And then we get a little bit older and apparently a little bit more responsible, especially when we've got children. Yet that stigma starts to come in that, gosh, if I pour that second glass in front of other people, they'll start to judge me.
Yeah.
And it's that whole. So would you say that was probably when you started to feel that maybe you've got a issue, or it wasn't socially accepted, or did you meet a new crowd and it became socially acceptable?
Yeah, look, I think a few things happened there. I think definitely there was a little nagging voice inside me that was going, your drinking's not normal, but I didn't want to hear it. So I just kept shoving it down and ignoring it for a really long time. I definitely had surrounded myself with other people that like to drink like I did, because then you lull yourself into this space where, well, I just drink like her, so of course that's normal. And so you can then tell yourself the story that it's absolutely fine to drink a bottle of wine on a Monday night. Like, who doesn't do that? And this all coincided as well with a moment in time where alcohol's starting to be marketed to women as a solution. It's normalized that alcohol is the solution to any kind of adversity that you're facing. When my mum was parenting me, she wasn't surrounded with adverts and Facebook memes telling her that alcohol was the solution to parenting. But when I became a new parent, everywhere I turned, there's like baby grows and memes and Mother's Day cards just covered in bottles of wine telling you that parenting is hard, mumming is hard, and you need alcohol as a way to get through it. So you're getting constantly that messaging as well, which is really harmful.
When did you, or what were the first sort of signs or your thoughts that maybe I need to make some changes?
There was a couple of incidents. There was one at a party when I'd gone to a friend's 40th and I got really drunk and I didn't eat anything. There were shots of tequila. I'd gone outside for a cigarette because I only smoked when I drank, and I crouched down to put out my cigarette. But because I was really drunk and I was wearing high heels, which I never normally did, I toppled forwards and I had no reflexes because I was drunk, and I landed face first on a concrete driveway. I smashed my nose, smashed my lip, there's blood everywhere. I had to get taken home and put to bed. And I woke up the next morning to my 5-year-old daughter standing beside the bed saying, Mummy, what happened to your face? And I can't even tell you the feeling inside of utter self-disgust and shame and remorse and humiliation and sadness. And I could tell you I never drank again, but that would not be true. But that was probably the start. I didn't know it then, but I think that was the start of me going, this can't continue. I had no off switch. It was like I was on this path of self-destruction, and I was trying to limit my drinking because I think subconsciously I was becoming aware it was a problem. But that meant that when I did drink, it was like I had this permission to get as drunk as I wanted to because I hadn't drank for 4 days. And so it was like I was making up for the 4 days I hadn't drank. So then on the Saturday night, I could just get absolutely wasted. And that's just not a way to live. And so that was definitely a moment for me. And then a few weeks later, I had been to a friend's birthday. We'd gone to one of those high teas where they're just constantly, it was free-flowing champagne for 3 hours. We started at 12 at lunchtime, and I got home at 2 a.m. And so, I mean, you can imagine how much champagne was drunk over that 14 hours. And my husband was away fishing on the Sunday morning, so he'd got up at 5 a.m. and gone fishing, and I had to take our son to cricket. And I remember waking up And William was stood at the end of my bed in his cricket gear. You know, that's the thing that he loved most in the world, going, come on, Mum, we've got to go. And I just knew I couldn't drive. I just knew, like, there is absolutely no way I can get behind a wheel now. And I made up some excuse to William. I think I might have even said, oh, it's been cancelled, which was an outright lie. And then I sat in the bath and I cried and cried and cried because I was like, what is wrong with you that you can't take your son on a Sunday morning to the thing that he loves most in the world because you're still pissed? And that was a big wake-up call. And it was actually that Sunday that I was scrolling on Facebook and I saw someone had posted that they'd taken a break from alcohol and they'd read a couple of these books and what a difference it had made. So I was like, right, that's it. I'm going to take a 21-day break because they say it takes 21 days to break a habit. And in my mind, I just had a bad habit. And so I just decided that day I'm doing 21 days off. And that was the start of the rest of my life.
Sort of that start of your subconscious developing the idea or even changing your identity, because I guess for so many years, were you Sarah, did you identify as Sarah the drinker?
Of course, yeah. Like since I was 14, I was Sarah the party girl. And so that break I intended to do for 21 days and I did 100 days. And then I went back to drinking. But that 100 days gave me that first time since the age of 14, other than pregnancy, which kind of doesn't count because I was a hormonal mess during pregnancy, so I was not normal. It gave me a glimpse of who I was without alcohol. And do you know what? I really liked her. Like, I was calm. I was content. I had this inner peace that I just hadn't had before. My anxiety pretty much disappeared. I was sleeping better. I had more energy. I was going to the gym. I was losing weight. People were saying to me, what's different about you? You look amazing. And I was like, I've just taken a break from booze. But then you start getting weird feedback from that because people are like, oh, well, don't say you're going to turn into one of those teetotalers. And like I even had a school mum say to me, oh, let's catch up when you're drinking again. So that was all quite challenging. And it got to the 100 days and I thought, okay, well, this was in 2017. I clearly don't have a problem because if I had a problem, I wouldn't have been able to just take 100 days off. So what I've done is I've just had a reset. That's exactly what I needed. And now I'm going to go back to drinking and I'm going to be a grown-up drinker. And I'm going to be someone that just has a glass of wine every now and then with dinner or with a steak or, you know, roast or whatever. And other than that, I'm going to carry on because this is great and I love how I feel. And within a month, I was back to drinking exactly the same as I have been before.
And it's interesting when you say about the mothers, you know, having a drink. I remember, you know, when you'd go and pick the kids, I'd go and pick my kids up from school and there was a winery near where my boys went to school. And we would meet for a glass of wine before we go and pick our, God, you think about it now, you know, you're in there having a glass of wine, then you're all going into school, pick up your kids, drive home, run them off to all their activities. But that was like what we did. And whether it was because we were, I don't know, the stay-at-home mums and mums whined because, like you said earlier, because isn't that what mums did? Because they had nothing else to do?
Exactly.
Midlife isn't about slowing down. It's about your comeback. At Simply Nourish, we fuel your energy, build your strength, and help you thrive through the menopause transition. Forget quick fixes. This is about real change, backed by science and led with heart. Join a community of vibrant women rewriting what's possible. Simply Nourish, stronger, wiser, and just getting started. So you've had this realisation that you're in a much, much better mental, physical, emotional state, and you moved back into having a few more drinks. Again, what was that tipping point that really made you say, no more?
So 2017 was when I took the 100 days off.
Yep.
And I went back to drinking in the August of 2017. And then I had my last drink in April 2019. So that was pretty much 2 years of I kept taking breaks, going back to drinking, taking breaks, going back to drinking, and I was yo-yoing. And I just needed to do that. That was part of my process because I refused to believe for a really long time that moderation wasn't possible for me. And I thought I was weak, I was a failure. I just had to try harder. And I could be one of those normal grown-up drinkers that would just be able to have a glass of wine. I still thought that I wanted alcohol in my life. I just didn't want to drink in the way that I had. And I thought it was my fault. And I had to just try harder. And I kept trying and trying and trying. And then finally, and over that time, I'd read tons of books, listened to loads of podcasts. I was in a couple of Facebook communities, mostly UK driven, because this was not a big movement in Australia at that time. And a lot of people were saying to me, Sarah, why are you fighting to keep alcohol in your life when you know that everything in your life is better when you don't drink? And moderation is not an option for you, like it's not for most of us. And I've unpacked a lot around that, and I understand now why. And I think I just needed to prove to myself, A, that moderation wasn't going to happen. And it was actually exhausting and making me really miserable. And B, just having that realization and having someone say to me, everything in your life is better when you don't drink. You're happier, you're healthier, you're calmer, like everything that you want out of your life. And so why do you keep going back to it? And I just knew April 2019, I had my last drink, and I knew it would be my last drink, and I knew that that was going to be it.
So this leads us into the area that you specialise in is grey area coaching. What is the difference between grey area and being an alcoholic? Because if we go by what all our government regulations are about, if you drink X amount of units a week, you're in the danger zone. And even doctors will say, alcoholism. Where is that difference? What makes you say that you're a grey area drinker but not an alcoholic?
Yeah. So there's a lot of nuance around this. And the way I see it is this. Let's just think of a scale of 1 to 10, right? On someone's drinking. 1 being someone who never drinks. Maybe they have a glass of champagne at a wedding once a year. 10 being someone with physical dependency on alcohol who needs to have medical rehab support to safely withdraw from alcohol, because alcohol is one of only 3 substances that the human body can die from if we come off it immediately, if we are physically dependent. That would be severe alcohol use disorder. Grey area describes the middle. So it's someone who's not a take it or leave it drinker, but they don't have physical dependence. So physical dependence is you're waking in the morning and you need to drink, and it's not safe for you to just stop drinking because you could die because you're consuming so much alcohol. I had no physical dependence on alcohol. I didn't drink every day. I could take breaks from alcohol. I didn't get withdrawal from not drinking. But I had an emotional reliance on alcohol. Once I started, I often couldn't stop. It took up a lot of headspace. So some of the signs that you're a grey area drinker would be you have difficulty limiting your alcohol intake. So if you go out and say, I'm just going to have 2. So for a start, someone who's not a grey area drinker, they don't even have to set themselves a limit of how much they're going to drink because alcohol just isn't a thing, right? Whereas grey area drinkers, they're often thinking about alcohol. They're deciding when they're going to drink, when they're not going to drink. They might have said, I'm not going to drink tonight, and then they decide they're going to drink tonight. So they go, oh, well, I'll drink tonight and not tomorrow, and I'll have tomorrow's units tonight, and then I'll just take... There's all this chatter around alcohol. People who are a 1 or 2 on that scale, there is no chatter. Alcohol is just don't care. Grey area drinkers, they're in that, I would say, a 4 to a 7 or a 4 to an 8 on that scale. So we have difficulty limiting it. We get a physical craving for it. So it's not physical dependence, but it's like once the idea is in the head, I want to have a wine, it's like it doesn't shut up until we have the wine. And we might kind of do a detour on the way home to go and buy that wine because that thought is in our head. Whereas someone who's not a grey area drinker, well, A, they don't even get the thought that alcohol is the solution to anything. I have a lot of women I work with, and they will wake up in the morning and go, I'm not drinking tonight. but then they'll have a shit day. Their boss has been horrible. They forgot something major at work. It's made them feel really bad about themselves. They've had a call from school to say that their son's been really naughty and they've got to go and pick him up. All these things happen, and their only go-to solution is alcohol. So all those thoughts of, I'm not going to drink tonight, are out the window, and alcohol has become the solution to any of life's adversity. Some of the other signs of grey area drinking are we've built tolerance. So what used to just be 1 glass or 2 glasses has now become, I work with many women who can drink a bottle of wine a night and still get up at 5 a.m. and go to the gym and think nothing of it. And a bottle of wine a night is not healthy and it's not right. Like a bottle of wine, if it's a 15% bottle, that could be 8 or 9 units of alcohol in one bottle. We're not meant to have more than 10 units in a week. And I'm working with women who are drinking 70 units a week and completely functioning, they think fine. I would argue they just don't know the difference anymore because the alcohol's just in their system continuously. So their version of normal is simply that. Some of the other signs might be we have noticed that alcohol's starting to have a negative impact on us. Maybe it's destroying our sleep. We're waking up at 3 a.m. We've noticed an increase in anxiety. Maybe we've had some health markers back, like liver enzymes or elevated blood pressure, or things like this. We know that removing alcohol would improve those things, but we don't do it. And another sign might be our attempts to change our drinking don't last. So this is where sometimes dry July or Feb fast or things like that can actually be a little bit detrimental because someone goes, oh, well, I've taken 30 days off, so I don't have a problem. And then they go back to drinking, but quite often their drinking just goes back exactly as it was before. Sometimes it goes back to more, as if they're making up for lost time. So we can't create long-term change with our drinking. We're constantly moving the goalposts and justifying why we're moving the goalposts. I'm not going to drink until Friday, but then it's Wednesday. Oh, I've had a shit day. I really want to have a drink. Well, maybe I could have a drink tonight. So these are some of the signs that we're in that grey area. And I mean, it's estimated a lot of people, we're talking millions, sit in this, if not billions, sit in this grey area. And the most worrying thing is we know that this is where there's been a huge increase for women. So alcohol use disorder, which would be just ticking 2 of those that I've just said, would be defined as mild alcohol use disorder, has increased 87% in women in the last 30 years.
And you know what? I didn't even need to have a shitty day. It could be a beautiful day and I still want to go home and have a wine to celebrate that sun out on the deck.
Oh, totally. The weather is a massive trigger. So weather, celebration, like it's anything, right?
Yeah.
We've got associations with it that are very, very deep.
Yeah. And we're going to jump into an ad break, but when we come back, I really want to hone in more on the science side of it, because I feel that, when you've talked about stopping for dry July or not drinking all week, I know myself and other people in the morning saying I'm not going to drink, but we can't do it. So it is something chemically is going wrong.
At BBG Built, we're straight talking builders who know the value of comfort, warmth and smart design. Whether you're planning a renovation or something new, we make the process simple and stress-free. Let's help you plan well and build better. Visit www.bbgbuilt.co.nz to get started.
So the science behind what's happening in our body. You talk about 3 neurotransmitters. Is it GABA, serotonin, and my favourite, because that's probably the one I've done a little bit of research on, is dopamine. But before we get into it, can you explain what a neurotransmitter is, please?
So it sends a signal to it's like a chemical messenger that is sending messages constantly within your brain that's going to dictate how you feel. So GABA is the neurotransmitter that helps us feel calm. So it relaxes us, it helps us feel that we have a capacity for whatever we're dealing with. Serotonin is the neurotransmitter that is responsible for that sense of well-being. So serotonin is our happy hormone. So if you've heard of someone being on an antidepressant, SSRI, that is a serotonin uptaker. So it's to build and increase our serotonin. A lack of serotonin is depression. And the third is dopamine, which is our pleasure and reward center. So this is dopamine was even existed as a way to get humans to do hard things. So if you think going back to caveman days, about a tribesman who needs to make fire. So he sat for ages rubbing sticks together and rubbing, doing these sticks. And finally, after loads of hard work, they ignite and then a fire starts. He will get a dopamine hit from that because it makes him feel good. And dopamine is established to help humans to keep doing hard things for survival, which is why it was created. The problem now is that we live in a modern world that gives us dopamine hits from sitting on our phone, having a wine, opening a packet of chips, or any of those things. But that is the dopamine is the reward and pleasure center of the brain.
And so you said serotonin, if we don't, just so I've got this right, serotonin, if we don't have enough, it's sort of our depressant.
Yeah, it's a low mood. Yeah.
So alcohol is a depressant. So if we are consuming alcohol regularly, are we making ourselves even more depressed or more anxious? Is that how that all sort of wraps in together?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things going on. So number one, so GABA is responsible for us feeling calm. So when we're deficient in GABA, we're going to feel more anxious. We're going to be overthinking things. We start ruminating. You go down rabbit holes. And that's what GABA is. So
so does alcohol suppress GABA?
So alcohol actually causes a GABA-like effect. So you know how when you drink, alcohol shuts down your central nervous system. It's a depressant. So it makes you in that moment feel incredibly calm because you're getting a GABA-like sensation. The problem is that repetitively, constantly drinking causes us to be deficient in GABA. And because we become deficient in GABA, we crave alcohol more and more for the effect that alcohol gives us because the body stops being able to make it itself. So it's really interesting that people drink because of their anxiety, but often don't realize that they're making themselves more anxious by drinking. And one of the things that I get the pleasure of seeing day in, day out in my alcohol-free programs is so many women telling me, my anxiety has massively reduced. And they don't expect that to happen. The thing with serotonin is 90% of our serotonin is made in the gut. So this is why there's such a strong gut-brain connection. If our gut health is poor, we can't make serotonin, which means that we are going to have lower mood and feel more depressed. Alcohol is one of the number one causes of poor gut health because it causes leaky gut, it impacts gut dysbiosis, which is the balance of the bacteria in the gut. So it's not just about what it does to the brain, but it's also about what it does to our gut health, which is where we're creating the serotonin. And then when it comes to dopamine, if you think about your dopamine as being, let's just think about it as a scale, because I think it's really helpful. Let's just say we're at a number 5 on our dopamine, and 10 is the highest and 1 is the lowest. When we have a drink, it causes the dopamine to massively shoot up very, very quickly. And that changes for everyone. So this is your response to alcohol and how high a dopamine hit you get from alcohol. It's not the same for everybody. It's different. And that's interesting to me because that helps me understand. So why does my friend Christine have one drink and not even think about having another one and just doesn't care? Whereas for me, I was like, one drink, I am just getting started. Let's get the party going, right? And I know that my dopamine reward center gets massively lit up by alcohol. So I was a 5, and within like a couple of minutes, I'm at a 10. As the alcohol wears off, you don't go back to a 5. You actually go into what's called a dopamine trough, and you go down to a number 1. And when you're in a dopamine trough, you crave the thing that gave you the high in the first place to come out of it. So that's then what makes you want another drink. So the higher you go, the lower you fall. And this is where addiction lies with all things that you can become addicted to that light up your dopamine reward center very, very quickly. The brain's not designed to get lit up as quickly as that with such high levels. The brain is designed to have to work really hard, like the guy that was rubbing his sticks together to get the dopamine hit. So your brain loves effort-based dopamine. So when we talk about that, exercise is a great example. When you go for a run, you feel really good afterwards. To just sit on your sofa and have a glass of wine, eat a packet of biscuits, and do some online shopping, your brain's just getting bang, 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 these massive dopamine hits that make you feel good in the moment. But the troughs that you get after that are pretty low. Another reason why alcohol just makes our mental health feel so crap, because we just don't feel stable. We're up or we're down, we're up or we're down. And that was where I was for a really long time. Even when I wasn't drinking, like the next day, up or down. I was a great mood or a sad mood. And this is where alcohol really messes with the homeostasis, the balance of our neurotransmitters. And they say it takes 72 hours for alcohol to physically leave your system. It takes up to a year to 18 months for your neurotransmitters to completely rebalance after decades of continuous drinking.
Is that why also, say with the dopamine, as you said, it's almost like an anticipatory neurotransmitter where, you can early in the day, even though you're not having a drink, it's the anticipation for that drink because you're so low, you're way below your baseline that you're desperate to get it back up again.
Yeah, so research has shown you start producing dopamine before you've even had the drink. So just thinking about it, the same with like chocolate and things like that, like anything that gives you a quick dopamine hit, your brain starts to produce dopamine just in anticipation of the thing.
How so the only way to really stop that or change it is by actually giving up the substance, isn't it?
Totally. I really recommend, there's a brilliant book called Dopamine Nation, and she, Dr. Anne Lemke, it's a brilliant book, and she really, really goes through in detail all the different parts involved in the dopamine pathway and how do we start to rebalance dopamine. So brilliant things are exercise, sunshine, getting enough sleep. When we're tired, we downregulate our dopamine receptors, and diet. So protein is the amino acids in things like chicken and beef and eggs and cottage cheese and nuts and seeds. The amino acids are what build dopamine.
But how do you change a habit?
One day at a time. You do, because I'm proof of that. Like, I couldn't have a single thing happen to me without the thought being I have to have a drink. I don't even think about drinking now. I haven't thought about drinking for a long time. Neuroplasticity is a thing. Our brain does change. Last year, the worst thing that could ever happen to me happened when I got a phone call saying my darling dad had died, and I never even had the chance to say goodbye to him. And it was really, really shock. And so many people said to me, do you feel like having a drink? And I was like, of course I don't. Like, there is not a single part of me that believes that having a drink would make this situation different or better or soothing or anything like that. And so it's just really encouraging to know you can't fast track it. It's not a quick and easy solution, but it does happen. You have to go through the hard bit to get to the easy bit. Like now, and for a long time, like I've just celebrated 7 years alcohol free, but it happens very quickly. After a few weeks, you'll find that your associations with alcohol change, but we've just got to do the time and just get through it.
And as we're a show that specialises in midlife and menopausal women who are in the transition or out the other side, of course, alcohol and menopause, they don't really marry up nicely together, do they?
No. So what we're finding is women are so much more susceptible to the health risks of alcohol than men, and even more so in midlife. And there's a couple of reasons for this. So there's an enzyme called alcohol dehydrogenase, ALDH, whose job is to get alcohol out of the body as quickly as possible because it's a poison, it's a toxin to the human body. So women produce less of this enzyme than men. So for a man and a woman that drink the same amount, a man is more efficient at getting the alcohol out of his system quicker than a woman. So more of the alcohol enters the woman's bloodstream simply because she's not as efficient as a man at metabolizing alcohol. As a woman ages, her levels of ALDH drop. So even in her 20s, she wasn't as efficient. By the time she's 50, she's really not efficient. Add to this the fact that a woman's liver volume is shrinking from her 30s onwards. So a woman in her 30s compared to a woman in her 60s has got a very different liver, and the capability of that liver, because that's what processes all the toxins out of your body, is less effective. So again, you've got more of the alcohol going into a woman's bloodstream. The higher the alcohol content going into a woman's bloodstream, the more impact this has on things like sleep, on things like hot flushes, on things like anxiety, on things like midlife weight gain around the tummy. Like, there are so many different factors that come into play with alcohol. And a lot of women say to me, I was fine in my 20s and 30s, and then I got into my 40s and 50s, and just a couple of drinks, I can't sleep, I feel terrible the next day. And that's just because our beautiful body is not designed to process alcohol. But the problem I see is that women in their 40s and 50s and 60s are the only demographic where alcohol use is going up and not down. And that's alarming, and that's a problem, because we are even less efficient at that age of processing and removing alcohol. And this is where the cancer risks and things like this come in.
It leads nicely into a paragraph I'd like to read to you from your own book. And I wonder if there's a link here when we're talking about women in their 50s and 60s actually increasing their alcohol intake. You've written, I remember pondering this question so much back in 2019 when I'd first removed alcohol. I had this newfound energy, more time, more clarity, and a feeling that I wanted to fulfill myself more, but I had no idea where to start. What is our purpose? And often that's a question we ask ourselves. We reach 50 and suddenly we ask, what is our purpose? In our 30s, we had our kids and we'd have our drinking mother friends. Suddenly they've all left our life, and we're sitting here, maybe our children, if we were lucky enough to have children, have left our life, and we sit there and potentially alcohol fills a void.
Yeah, and that's true for so many women that I work with. I find a lot of women are lonely, they're disconnected, they have given so much of themselves to their kids, and then their kids don't need them anymore, and they don't know who they are without being the role of mum. Maybe they've retired and without the role of who they were at work. Maybe they've separated without the role of who they were as a wife. Maybe all three, which is a shit show, right? And so this is where I come in with the biggest smile on my face, and I say to my beautiful ladies, but this is exciting. This is where you get to go on an adventure with curiosity and compassion and discover who you are as the woman you are today and what lights you up. And I run a program called Rediscovering Me. And that's what everything that this is about is, let's go out there into this big, wonderful, amazing world and start having experiences. And then let's discover, well, did I like that or not? And they can be big or small things. They can be travel. They can be going back to university. They could be doing night school. They could be taking up horse riding lessons and drum classes and amateur dramatics. And they could be small things like, actually, I found that when I go to bed at 9 o'clock, my body really responds to that. And I'm a morning person, and I love getting up at 5 and having a coffee with my dog on the sofa and having that morning time to journal. Like, it's all about giving yourself the gift of self-discovery, because I heard something the other day and it really resonated with me. And this woman was writing this article, and she said, when you take away your vices, what you're left with is your life. Mm-hmm. And I love that, because let's create a life we love so we don't need the vices, whether that's scrolling, whether that's eating, whether that's alcohol, whether that's online shopping, gaming, whatever it is. Let's actually create a life that we love so we don't need to escape it. And surely we all deserve that, because don't we all deserve for this time on planet Earth to be happy?
Absolutely, we do, and that's a fantastic thing to bring up, because it is that when you are feeling alone or you are feeling so unguided, it's hard to see over the mountain of what potentially could be there. And so we bring it back to say, because it's alcohol and these women are still menopausal, or just on the other side of it, you let's start with sleep. You've got these women, they want to make change, but alcohol's first and foremost, big rock, sleep. And they need to get that under control so they can start to make changes and move forward.
Totally. And so I run a program called Thrive After 40, which is all around the physical foundational principles for women in their 40s, 50s, and 60s to actually understand how to have energy. Because without energy, we've got nothing. Like, you want energy, health, and vitality, right? So we want to age in a way that we prevent disease and that we have the energy and the zest to go and actually live a big life. And that truly comes down to how we look after ourselves. It's not exciting, it's not new, it's not rocket science. Am I getting enough sleep? Am I eating well? Am I moving my body? Am I having time outside? Like, let's get those fundamentals nailed. Because without that, if we're tired and anxious and feeling crap, of course we're not going to go and live an amazing life. We're just going to stay small. We're going to stay inside. We're going to scroll. We're going to drink wine. We're going to eat chocolate. And then that just makes us feel worse. And so it's self-perpetuating. So Thrive After 40 is my signature program to help women thrive through understanding the physical principles. And then once we've got energy, then we get to go and start creating bigger lives.
Absolutely. You did mention something much earlier in the show about the marketing of alcohol to us, that it is such a normalised thing. And that when I've thought about it, whenever you watch a show, whenever they're stressed, they come into the house and they fill a glass of wine, or they're out for dinner and it's always wine. That doesn't help us, does it?
Absolutely not. And it's you become so aware of it. So all the ladies listening now, I encourage you, like, start to notice where you see alcohol. So it's just been Mother's Day, and I do it every year. I'm not going to name them, but I go into a very famous pajama shop here in Australia, and I get my daughter to film me holding up their pajamas they never let me down. Every year they have pajamas covered in Prosecco bottles. And I just stand there with a disgusted face on, like, and I film it, and all the staff are just looking at me like, what's she doing? And I'm just like, what message are we sending to our daughters and our little girls to go and buy mum pajamas covered in Prosecco bottles that says wine time, as if that's what mums need booze to be a mum? You know, like, it's everywhere. And we know that, and this is what makes me so angry, that 30 years ago, the alcohol industry identified they were not making enough money from women. So they, for the first time, segregated their marketing and created drinks just for women and marketing campaigns directed at women. So it's no coincidence that alcohol use disorder in women has increased 87% in the last 30 years, because it coincides with the marketing of alcohol.
And even like you're looking at the labels of bottles now, they're much more appealing visually. So you think, oh, now that looks rather delicious. I think I'll grab one of them, or two. Exactly.
And it'd be very interesting to see what happens. We know that alcohol is a level 1 carcinogen. It directly causes 7 types of cancer. So
can I pause you there? 7 types of cancer. What? Ooh, tell me.
So alcohol's level 1 carcinogen, which means it directly causes cancer. So breast cancer is very significant, liver, and then think about where alcohol goes. So the mouth, the tongue, the esophagus. I'll have to get the. Could I just?
Yeah, go for gold. Go for gold. I mean, gee, one's enough, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it's 7, and I just need to get the exact ones. So it's mouth, throat, esophagus, liver, breast, bowel, and tongue.
Wow. But hey, let's market it, eh?
And this is the thing, right? So tobacco is in the same carcinogenic category as alcohol, and tobacco advertising was banned. The packets had to have pictures of disgusting toes and teeth and all of that all over them. And yet alcohol is still marketed with butterflies and beautiful pictures and, you know, blackberries and all the rest of it. And it's like, when are we going to change that to actually help to support the education of women? There was a study done by a university in Melbourne that showed only 1 in 5 women in Australia are aware of the link between alcohol and breast cancer.
And I think that would be pretty similar here. Because to be honest, it wasn't until I discovered you that I discovered that. No idea. And it's just about education and making women more aware of, you know, we're trying to eat right, we're trying to exercise right, yet we'll go home and drink some wine because, you know, we've been marketed to it, or it's just what we do.
Exactly. And, you know, people say to me, oh, are you anti-alcohol? And I'm like, no, I'm not anti-alcohol. I'm just pro women being given the information to be able to make informed decisions. If you know the risks and you want to do that, go for it. But I just get so shitty with the fact that so much information is deliberately kept to make us believe that it's absolutely fine and there's no risks attached, because there really are.
Yeah, it's really sad. And like you said before, we're teaching our young daughters the same habits, and the marketers are just loving it. And you get all the little Alco Pops and everything like that now as well.
Yeah.
Much more accessible and all full of sugar. But that's another topic altogether.
Yeah.
Look, we are running out of time, unfortunately. So a couple of little things just to finish up with. So for someone listening who is feeling curious, but maybe a little overwhelmed by what we've just been discussing, where do you think would be a great place for them to start?
So just to acknowledge, curiosity is a really good place to come from. So get a copy of my book, Beyond Booze.
And I do recommend it.
Yeah, I think, you know, I wrote that for every woman out there who will, and so many women see themselves in my story, and they feel so much comfort in not being alone. The second thing would be join one of my alcohol-free challenges. They're for women. We get 700, 800, 900 women from all over the world, many in New Zealand, who come together and take a break from booze together. Don't do it alone. The third thing would be just go onto my website, sararusbatch.com, and download my free guide of 100 things to do instead of drink. Like, it just helps you to start thinking about, do I really need that drink right now? Or could I look at Sarah's guide and go do that, or that instead? Follow me on Instagram. I'm always sharing tons of free content on there about all the tips and everything that helped me. And that's just at Sarah Rusbatch. And start listening to podcasts. There's so many great ones out there. I've got my podcast, which is Stronger, Bolder, Wiser. But there's many podcasts out there that really, really help women to start to understand, well, what do I want to do with my life going forward? And what role does alcohol have in that?
And I would recommend them also to join your Facebook community, the Women's Wellbeing Collective. And even if you're like me and you start off as just a little observer, a little stalker, you suddenly realise you're not alone. And that's a really, really powerful thing to know, that you are not alone. There's so many women who are going through exactly the same as you. You can ask questions, you can just look, you can just observe and learn from them as well. Totally recommend that you do that. Sarah, thank you so much for this conversation. I think what I love most is that it isn't just about restriction or judgment. It's about awareness, curiosity, and giving ourselves permission to ask the question of ourselves, how is this actually making me feel? And I think it's a really empowering place to begin. If you'd like to learn more about Sarah's work, and we've just discussed, you can follow her on Facebook, her Facebook group, Instagram, go onto her website, and as I said, totally recommend her book. I better get the title completely right. Beyond Booze, How to Create a Life You Love, Alcohol-Free. Sarah, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me.
You've been listening to Simply Nourish, empowering women through menopause and beyond. With me, Brenda Bickerstaff. I'm a certified, registered and an experienced nutritionist and menopause coach. I'm passionate about supporting women to thrive during menopause with personally tailored science-backed nutrition and lifestyle strategies. You can find more information at simplynourish.co.nz. We even have a new episode for you on the second Sunday of every month at 5 p.m. on Plains Media. So mark your calendar and tune into 96.9 FM and plains.org.nz or subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcast or YouTube. You can also support Simply Nourish, empowering women through menopause and beyond by leaving a review. Stay up to date with the show on Instagram at Simply Nourish NZ and Facebook at Simply Nourish, where I also share the latest health information and strategies to support your menopause journey. Brought to you by BBG Built, your builders of choice, and Simply Nourish. Take care, trust yourself, and remember, small steps for big changes.